Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrejs Pildegovičs. I represent Latvian Foreign Ministry, Special Envoy for Latvian candidacy to the UN Security Council, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you to this special expert panel on the state of the Security Council, on the opportunities what elected members of the Security Council might achieve. I deliberately don't use the term non-permanent members because I want to stress that we prefer to be called elected. We preferred more democratic election process, and we don't think that those permanent members have acquired this position in a proper democratic way. We have a distinguished panel of experts. I'm very proud that the panel represents different regions, different regional groups, Eastern European group, Western European group, and others, as well as GRULAC group representing Latin America and the Caribbean countries, colleagues with diplomatic experience, with academic experience, and we are here to examine what could, should, ought to be done to make this structure more relevant, more operational, and what lessons can be learned from the successful recent terms of a number of countries on the Security Council. This panel is comprised of 4 distinguished experts: Dr. Gunda, Director of the Center for International Studies and Head of the Chancery. Thank you for hosting us in the Riga Castle.
Thank you.
A special honor. Ambassador Sven Jürgenson, former permanent representative of Estonia to the United Nations. And Sven has been in the council, next to the table, in the consultation rooms, and we very much welcome your presence here. Ambassador Alejandro Alday Gonzalez of Mexico is a dear colleague and has worked in the UN in New York and has chaired the Mexican Academy of Diplomacy as well. And last but not least is a colleague from Germany, Dirk Stockhausen, representing UN division. And Germany has had recently term on the council and has aspired already for the new one. And Latvia is in an election campaign, and I guess Germany is also in election campaign, so we can compare a little bit notes on that one. But let's start our discussion. The time is very precious, and I would like to ask Gunda, Reire, to comment on your recent research, what lessons we can draw from the previous campaigns, what reasons for being on the council have been used by the countries, what is the rationale, because of course many countries are questioning and people in the public are questioning whether this structure is still relevant and still effective, what we can learn from our recent member states on the council, and what Latvia maybe can use during our term in 26-27 should we are elected.
Andrejs, thank you very much, and yes, welcome to the Riga conference. I'm happy to see all familiar faces here and friends and guests. If I answered your question in a nutshell, I would say that this structure is problematic but still relevant. Yes, thank you for this question about the research. In a small group of colleagues, we conducted analysis of 6 countries in this report. And by the way, you can grab your own free copy here in the conference. We constructed 12 rules for campaigning a membership, but today I would like to highlight 3 important takeaways, or maybe let's call them rules too. The first one is that you must be at that table, otherwise you risk being on the menu. Because on the one hand, everyone agrees that the Security Council structure is is flawed, diplomatically speaking. If we speak directly, it is non-democratic. We know that this council can't make many important decisions. It is struck, it is paralyzed. You can use any adjectives you like, and I'm afraid that you will be still right. The Security Council, in many cases, it is dysfunctional. And consensus on how to fix it all, it is still out of reach. But I think that if you think about the Security Council and the question whether we should run for the elected seat on the Council, I think the either-or fallacy in thinking isn't helping at all. Because the Security Council, with all its flaws, is still the institution which is the most important and influential one in matters of maintenance of international peace and security. And the UN, with all its flaws, is still the place where the battlefield over the rules-based international order, international law takes place. Therefore, the short answer is yes, from time to time, with the particular, regularity, you must be at that horseshoe table. The second thing I'd like to highlight in this introductory part is that you must be able to manage not only resources, time resources, financial or human resources, you must be able to manage also your expectations. Because if you look at different campaigns, actually it's obvious that in many cases, candidate countries, they deal with quite unrealistic expectations about the membership on the Council. For instance, about exploding business opportunities, embracing, unseen markets, or even dictating the Council's agenda. It won't be so. High hopes lead to really bitter disappointment, we know that, and if you overpromise in this regard, you will definitely under-deliver. Everybody should avoid that. Without a doubt, there are concrete benefits of being a member, elected member at the Council, but those benefits actually should be looked upon from a quite different perspective. We know that power and influence really is distributed disproportionately on the Council. Nevertheless, and I think all other panels will agree, elected members are neither weak nor powerless, and actually the report shows that in many cases elected members can be very effective and very influential being on the Council, and there are many avenues of influence there, starting from the presidency, which is a unique and very, very interesting tool, the chairmanship of different subsidiary bodies, the penholdership system, the area formula, which is a neutral instrument and can be used, by everybody, but it is a very influential tool. I think Sven will perhaps explain in details what Estonians did. And actually, if I may, I would be happy to praise Estonian membership and actually use Sven personally, because we conducted a lot of interviews during this research, and I think many countries, many elected countries, look at Estonia as a golden child of the family of elected members, because you delivered everything what an elected member can. You set the standard for all of us, and everybody remembers Estonia serving on the Council. I think it's a success. And in short, about the third rule I'd like to mention here, and it's a universal law, I think, or rule for life: be yourself. Basically, you can't fake your international identity. And all the campaigns show that those campaigns who are not created specifically for the campaign or specifically designed for the current topicalities, but those who reflect the international identity and your past records as a country, those are the most successful ones. Therefore, it's wise to campaign and then also work on the council with the motto, what you see is what you get. It leads to credibility, it leads to authenticity, and yes, I think it's also one of the success elements of a good campaign. And I think also everybody will agree, especially Sven, we come from small countries. Our report shows that actually in terms of campaigns and success in the council, the size of the country isn't the factor that matters. What matters is your competencies, your ability to set clear, realistic goals, your experts, and actually ability just to work hard. I think I have spent all my time. I will stop here and be happy to engage in.
Thank you so much, Gunda, and thank you for the research. It will be available to all participants of this conference in printed version, but also on the web as well.
Indeed.
Sven, if I could pass the microphone to you with some retrospect, could you share your lessons learned on the Council? Of course, we always think that Estonians do better and they know better. You pioneered certain things. Cybersecurity was one of the subjects. What are your observations now?
Well, in Estonia, like I believe, especially in small countries, but I think in most countries that campaign to become members of Security Council, because of the resources that you have to put into getting there and being there, there is quite a lot of political debate going on, whether it's worthwhile, is it worth it? And the same happened in Estonia. But the problem a little bit for Estonia was, unfortunately, the debate started when there was no way back anymore. The government decision was made, some of the money was allocated, and then the debate started, when we were supposed to really campaign, do everything. So that was a kind of a difficult start. But why I'm mentioning this, it is that there were two main, most important arguments that was said against being in the Council. One of them was that the permanent members decide everything, and elected members have nothing to say, and it's doesn't mean anything at all. And the other one was that because of the global nature of issues on the table of Security Council, there might be situations where we have to take a stand in questions where we might get into trouble with our close allies that otherwise we could avoid. Now, both of those I found in the 2 years in the Council are completely wrong. First of all, in most cases, I have a disclaimer, actually. I'm talking about a time before the sea change in 2022. Maybe after the Russian aggression, things have changed considerably. I don't know. I'm out of it. But in our time, first of all, pretty much with very, very few exceptions, the Security Council did not work as 10 plus 5 or 5 plus 10. It worked as 15. I was in close contact with the Chinese ambassador, Russian ambassador, American ambassador, all the time, just exactly like they are among themselves. So it's not true that when you are a member of Security Council, the only thing is you don't have a veto right, but otherwise you are there as a full member of the Council. The other argument of saying that we might spoil our relations with our close allies turned out to be completely wrong. It was the other way around. Our cooperation, not only with the United States, France, UK, that was strong already, but fortunately we were there also with Germany. And so our cooperation with Germany, all of those relations were strong already, but I think they became even stronger and they became closer. There were so many more contacts and issues to discuss that actually, so therefore I would say in every aspect it is worthwhile being there. Like you said, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. So, but what makes it successful and why being there? You mentioned the regularity. Germany is there every 8 years. We looked, Ireland is every 20 years. Estonia was there the first time, 2021. And we were thinking, you know, Germany 8 years, Ireland 20 years. Maybe it would be good for us to be every 30 years. So we put in the candidature already to 2050. And there are all kinds of jokes about that we started making, is that first of all, it will be the best ambassador ever because he's born and raised to be ambassador at the United Nations. We can choose a baby already. But the other joke that now turns out is not a joke at all was I was always saying after I put it in, who knows whether the organization is there anymore, you know. It was funny at the time. I don't think it's funny anymore, because if you look at, we have another panel tomorrow talking about the UN Charter and everything. But I think being there alone is not enough. When it's only every 30 years for a country like Estonia, it means you have to be there with ambition. But you have to be cautiously ambitious, so that when you feel your strength, you should know your limits and play on the line all the time. And so the first year that we were in the council, we didn't feel secure enough to take a pen holdership, for example. There is something that is called a pen holdership that is officially doesn't exist, but it's just a habit. And it works with consensus. Like, usually it used to be that only the permanent members were holding the pen. Now it's not the case anymore. And so we decided the second year already, we have this already expertise, we know our strength, we can do it. And we took the pen holdership when Germany and Belgium left. We took the pen holdership for Afghanistan. If you think about how big a portfolio it is and how important in the Security Council, we did it together with Norway, and then we took pen holdership together with France for the EU Operation Irene that is to enforce UN sanctions on Libya. What is difficult in the pen holdership is basically everybody can grab a pen, and what it does is we draft the resolutions, we call the meetings, we inform others, so we have a lead on this subject. Everybody can grab a pen, theoretically, but the problem is you need to have a consensus so that China and Russia and everybody agrees that Estonia is holding the pen for something. And that was quite difficult. It took half a year for me to work with the Russians and Chinese especially to get them their agreement on that. But so being there, being ambitious, every 30 years going there and just sitting there really doesn't make any sense. You have to be having your priorities, and your priorities come from your own values. Like our priorities were international law, women's rights, you know, also cybersecurity, all the issues that Estonia is dealing with at home, they are shown also in the Security Council. And we were really proud that we managed to get cybersecurity on the Security Council table officially. Because it's really difficult, especially for China, Russia, but especially China, they look at the relevance for international peace and security very narrowly. And it's really difficult to have new subjects, new issues to come on the table of the Security Council. And we had a strategy of moving there from unofficial meetings and so on, and finally we got it officially on the table, so Security Council is discussing also matters of cybersecurity that are really important to us. And I will finish maybe saying, you know, when all these experiences that you get, especially for small countries, I think what is important is there is a day after. And one of the arguments in favor of going to the Council in most countries, including in Estonia, is the experience that our diplomats and our country gets from this. And it's really remarkable. The relationships, the learning of issues in the world and so on. And even during the campaign, you learn a lot of, you know, our president was traveling around the globe, you know, and you have new opportunities, new cooperations and so on. And the challenge is, when it's over, not to lose it. Because talking to most other countries who had been in the Council, small countries, they all had the same view of needing it, but once they were out, it was forgotten. And the diplomats who were serving at the mission at the time were just put into haphazard places, you know, here and there and so on. So I took as my task also as ambassador to fight as much as I could to get the people in the team the best possible places. And it's a win-win, because it's a good job for the diplomats, but it's also good for the government, because they are really good diplomats with this experience behind them. But I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Sven. And I certainly can confer that we are for continuity between the Baltic priorities. And I think as much as Benelux countries have done it in the past, we are interested to carry on some of your priorities as well. Ambassador Alday Gonzalez, Mexico was on the Council just recently, and could you share your lessons learned from that term, and maybe also if you could reflect a little bit on the E10 role within the Council in terms of building bridges between different regional groups, and how to make, not to sort of play E10 versus P5, but how to get job done so Council is functional, we get outputs, and elected members can realize their dreams.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the Riga conference. It's an honor for me being the ambassador of Mexico here in Latvia. On the lessons learned from a country like Mexico, this was in 2021-22 our 5th time at the Security Council, and I have to say it was the most well prepared, from the point of view that we organize a campaign well structured with stakeholders, with NGO, having conversations with them, but also including a good team in capital, a good team in New York, and experts that know very well the agenda of the Security Council, for not start from zero. That is quite important. I think for us in this time it was a bit complicated, since the point of view that we started in the aftermath of the COVID, and immediately the aggression of Russia to Ukraine started. But we try to, as we do always in the United Nations, to play a role as a good member of the United Nations, namely invoking the rule of law meaningfully, trying to share within the Council the notion that every single resolution must be rooted in the norms that we have developed, invoking time to time the IHL, human rights, democracy values, that in fact there are a common tool to counter this power of the P5 on the agenda. When you share with the other members, elected members, the values of the UN into the peace and security agenda, you have more chances to succeed when it comes to a particular crisis or a potential conflict. Of course, we are a country that always are looking into the solutions under the whole avenues that the chapter of the UN provides, namely Chapter 6 and of course Chapter 7, but without a special threshold that has Chapter 7. It has been an important experience, since we could build on those topics that we have been working since 2009 and 10, that we were members of the Security Council as well, and working after that in the General Assembly, namely women, peace and security, an agenda that we look in 2009 in one way, and in 21 it was quite ahead in terms of the development of countries presenting or submitting the national plans, and etc., etc. But also human rights, and also this particular angle of children in conflict, the working group of children in conflict. So I think it's important for elected members to be active, to be present in different subsidiary bodies of the Security Council, to get the best outcome on your national agenda in foreign policy, but also to serve the United Nations. Many times it's always a good thing to work either as a co-pen holder or as a partner with one of the P5. And we have experienced very good cooperation with the French in women, peace and security, in children in armed conflict, and gender issues, in humanitarian access, in particularly when the first resolution was vetoed by the Russians, when dealing with the Ukrainian crisis, or the crisis that they created in Ukraine. So we went together to the General Assembly, and we approved a resolution based on the discussions, based on the grounds that we had worked in the Security Council. So I think it's important to continue as a country preparing people. And as the ambassador has mentioned, you need to keep your experts close by and to continue educating people on these matters if you are planning to stay in the Security Council often as we do. The average that we are is 14, 15 years. We want to continue to do so. We have already led behind that discussion that is quite similar, as you mentioned, in Mexico. Many voices, many politicians, and people with some sort of important people arguing, why are you going to the Security Council? You don't see that you are going to have big problems with your big power neighbor? So it was quite the opposite as well. You have a better understanding, a more dialogue, and better dialogue with the P5 when you are there and you work actively and constructively. But you need to compromise yourself at the Security Council. So it's a 24/7 work in the capital and in New York, and you have to be prepared for action in any minute. So I think that is one of the best lessons learned, to be ready all the time on a permanent basis in capital when it comes to the agenda of the Security Council, because it's indeed part of the agenda that Mexico is always working in the General Assembly. The respect for the rule of law that we normally don't I mean, as elected members, we need to raise the voice every time for the rule of law when it comes to the given situations. And it happens, or it looks like sometimes it's not important. It's more important just the political decision for a given situation. No, all the system is based on a structure that if you break the law or you do not respect the international law, the system is in crisis or can be in crisis. So we stand for the opposite. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you to Mexico for being such a strong defender of the UN Charter on many issues, and congratulations to the newly appointed minister, our former colleague, Juan Ramon de la Fuentes, as the new foreign minister.
Yeah.
Mr. Stockhausen, Germany is very active on the Security Council and the running campaign for elections in 2026. You had recent experience. What are the first thoughts in Berlin about the campaign, about the new priorities and the lessons learned from the previous term?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me on this panel. Indeed, we are running for membership of the Security Council 27-28, so the vote will be in 26. And this is in line with our practice of running more or less every 8 years to the Security Council, which, despite all the flaws, I think is still the center of multilateral diplomacy. So there's no further need to explain why you want to have a seat on the table. I think that's pretty clear. When you look at New York and the world in general, I think one cannot overstate the kind of frustration there is about a blocked Security Council, which is not delivering on the big crises of these days. I mean, the war against Ukraine, the Middle East, but also other topics like Sudan, Haiti, and other things that are important to the world are just not dealt with in an efficient way. So we really want to underline it makes a difference who is on the council, and it makes a difference who is among the elected 10. And this is not a question of big country versus small country, but it's a difference in terms of commitment, of political commitment, of leadership, of ideas, etc. And I mean, the UN is, and in that sense, Germany is no different from any other countries mentioned. The UN is an organization of small and medium countries, and we are all the same. We have one vote on the Security Council. So it makes a difference who is present there. I mean, in terms of this a blocked Security Council, it would be easy to be cynical about the state of affairs, but I think we're in no position to be cynical, but we have to be constructive and really engage. And so when you're running, obviously you always have your own priorities as a country, and I perfectly share the view. You have to be true to yourself and represent your country as it is. Then there are certain topics you want to push for at the Security Council. I mean, defense of the Charter of international law. We would certainly put an emphasis also on question of climate and security, for instance. But I think what really makes a difference is, are you able to deliver and to engage on all the files of the Security Council? We see it during our campaign, which is very instructive, as you say. You got to meet all these countries and also listen what is important to them. And I think that's what the United Nations is about. It's not only about our problems, it's about the problems of everyone. So I think, especially we as Europeans, I think we have to really be open to that and listen also what are the concerns of other parts of the world. And I think then on the Security Council, we also have to be able to deliver on that and really be engaged on matters that matter to other countries and to other groups. So I think being really successful is when you're able also to reach outside of your group and to engage maybe with other groups about issues that they care. This is outside the Security Council, but we had a very good experience co-facilitating the Summit of the Future recently, which ended in September with a consensus document of all 193 countries around general issues of, well, basically all the topics of multilateralisms are in that pact, and we co-facilitated this with our partners from Namibia, so from another group, and that was, I think, quite successful to reach consensus in these days is not an obvious thing. And I think that's the kind of method you also need to have on the Security Council, reaching out across the group and finding coherence among the E10.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations for co-facilitating with Namibia this very important document. And we had a little bit of drama on the first day of the summit, but thanks to the African group, the document got saved, and we had a great result. Gunda, you wanted to add something?
Yes. Yes. Well, we heard a lot about planning, which is crucial. We know that our internationality must be credible and priorities too, but there's one really influential factor that actually is a game changer, and these are external factors. If you look back, last 10 years, first of all, somebody mentioned the COVID-19 pandemics. It turned over everything, and all of a sudden, all your priorities or your plans, they were without any, additional value, because we all had to deal with and actually perform in a very unusual domain. Nobody knew anything about that kind of pandemics we had. And secondly, yes, all the diplomatic practices, they changed a lot, and the working, methods of the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council, they were even changed at that moment. And one more thing, yes, Russian aggression against Ukraine. And if you look, for example, at 2014, this is another interesting example because in 2014, Lithuania, our neighboring country, was on the council, and all of a sudden, well, we know that wars and crises, they usually break out unexpectedly, and yes, Lithuania found itself at the right place in the right time. It's important sometimes just on the one hand, to prepare, to have your priorities, but on the other hand, practice shows that the Security Council is full with unexpected things, events, and you must be very, very flexible. And sometimes, yes, as the Lithuanians, you find yourself really at the right time on the council.
Indeed, it is. Life is full of unexpected things, and of course we don't have crystal balls. But if I may, some of you have mentioned, of course, that there are many flaws, there are many situations which kind of roadblocks for the proper functioning of the council, including veto. We fully are cognizant that some reforms of the Council should take place. Latvia, Estonia, we've been championing some small step reforms as the members of ACT group, fine-tuning working methods. A few years ago, together with Liechtenstein, we managed to adopt this veto initiative, which has empowered General Assembly. Could you briefly comment, are any kind of low-hanging fruits for additional reforms? Of course, we have IGN process. Some further steps have been made, but how we can finally start text-based negotiations and start some more meaningful reforms. Sven, please.
Well, I am not in the system at the moment. I am just a trailing spouse. My wife is ambassador, so I'm more free to express my opinion, and I can tell you there will be no reform. Sorry for that, but I was the ambassador first time in 98 to 2000 in New York. And then there was a small group, G10, group of 10 countries that were working towards Security Council reform. And I was a young man, seeing how things are moving and looking around. And I heard this UNese language being repeated all the time. We are approaching the 55th anniversary of the United Nations. We should not lose the momentum. So I was back 15 years later. My very first meeting when I arrived in New York was this ACT group. ACT is a group that is working towards Security Council reform, and it's from the words accountability, coherence, transparency. So I was just arriving in New York, I was sitting at the table, and the first intervention that I heard was, we are approaching the 70th anniversary, we should not lose the momentum. So my first speech that I gave in New York was thanking everybody for keeping the momentum for the 15 years that I was gone. It's still there. But if you look at the logic of Security Council and United Nations, how it was created in 1945, it's not reformable. You cannot reform when you have 5 members with veto right, and they all have to be agreeing, because you can make small steps, like for example, when Estonia and Costa Rica, we had the lead of the procedures of electing a new Secretary General, the first time, official candidates, democratic process, it's all fine. There is this French-Mexican proposal for code of conduct, that countries should, and also the ACT group code of conduct, the same 2 similar proposals for countries to voluntarily not use veto right in cases of mass atrocity crimes. Well, when there is enough pressure coming from the member states, these are kinds of things that might happen. but thinking of the big things that are a real problem, because I don't think that the number of countries, like one thing is, I know Germany wants to be as a permanent member and so on, Japan, India, you know, Italy, but this is not the real problem. The real problem is how the Council works and the veto right and so on, and especially now, when one of the permanent members with veto right is so blatantly violating UN Charter, and there's nothing to be done. So that's why I'm saying I don't believe that anything significant can happen.
Thank you, Sven. Any thoughts from Germany or Mexico?
Yeah, thank you very much. And you mentioned we are advocating for a reform of the Security Council, and that means we're not only after the low-hanging fruits, to put it diplomatically. So, I mean, this is a longer-term venture, but once again, I mean, over half of the speeches at the General Assembly this year mentioned Security Council reform. I mean, this is really something many countries want. Now, it's difficult to deliver, I agree, and in the meantime, we have to search for other solutions, because otherwise the solutions will look for other fora. I mean, we have a new dynamics in the relation between the Security Council and the General Assembly, for instance. I mean, it is no coincidence that the Security Council is not delivering on Ukraine. We have managed to have some resolutions adopted in the General Assembly, I mean, which is good. Also, other crises are not dealt with in the Security Council. And if we look at the Middle East, for instance, I mean, this is one of the most pressing issues of everyday news, and the Security Council, and that is not a new situation, has not been able to really deliver products. So the only 3 resolutions the Security Council was able to adopt over the last year came from a joint venture of the elected 10 members, and that's a fundamental shift. It goes much beyond penholdership issues, I think. When the E10, who represent very different groups, but maybe have a better understanding of the responsibilities towards the broader membership, when the E10 agree on a project, and this could be the Middle East, but it could be another subject too, when they agree on a resolution and draft it, it's very difficult to have a veto. I mean, it's one thing for Russia to veto an American resolution, or the American to veto a Russian resolution, but for a permanent member to veto a resolution of the E10, that would really be something different. So this is why I said it really matters who is on the council, who is among the E10. Are they willing to withstand also pressure from the P5 on issues like that? And I think then the Council can still deliver, as we have seen.
I agree. Please, Ambassador.
Well, I mean, I have to say that the Council has, in a way, been reformed on its agenda. If you see the Security Council agenda 40 years ago, 20 years ago, and now, many topics or many agenda items that were not part, and the P5 were reluctant to include in the agenda, are now part of the agenda of the Security Council, creating some better conditions in different contexts. If we think about the reform from the structural point of view, it's quite complicated, and I think it will take time. It will need a leadership, it will need a consensus, but it's a quite difficult, high political decision. So what to do? Well, you need to, as a E10, and I agree with my colleague from Germany, we need to work on the sides of the agenda of the Security Council to create the conditions to impede that a certain resolution will be vetoed, or at least not opposed by the P5. It is possible. On the other hand, the different efforts by countries, like the ambassador mentioned, that Mexican-French initiative to not to veto a resolution when a certain conflict indicates or shows that there are mass atrocities. It's something different. And I think we need to continue to work on that side. It's not going to happen quickly, not happen in 2005 when Kofi Annan was pushing for a reform, and some thought that the reform was close enough for a vote. It didn't happen. But today it's almost impossible to think that will happen a vote with at least 2/3 majority. So you need to work on I was about to say the rules, but the rules are not clear indeed in the Security Council. But to work with the framework that the Council and the subsidiary organs provide to countries. For instance, Sanctions Committee. I remember I was part of the Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee, and it was impossible to talk if you were not a P5, because those were the times of after 9/11. But in the end, a group of countries, we managed to approve a delisting process, a human rights observer in the process of listing and delisting. And that was an advance in terms of human rights and dealing with people or allegedly involved in terrorism. So I think those are the avenues that we have at hand. Otherwise, the big problems will go in different contexts.
Yes. Thank you, Ambassador. I agree that to some extent E10 have managed to change agenda from within, though we could not have agreed on the resolution about climate change and Nexus pioneered by Ireland and Niger. But new subjects coming in, and artificial intelligence has become now a theme to be discussed, so there are changes. Gunda, please, shortly, because we need to pick up a couple of questions at least from the audience.
Just in short, if you think about the Security Council reform as a reform in the composition and decision-making, then on the one hand, it's essential. On the other hand, I don't believe it's possible. At the same time, historically, we've seen really crucial and decisive windows of opportunities. They happen from time to time, which means that all of a sudden they open, they close unexpectedly soon, but if you're ready enough to slip through, actually you can achieve lots of things. Latvian history actually is a proof of that. This is the reason why I think we must keep the very idea of reforming the Security Council warm. We must be able to react and not, when this window of opportunity opens, this wouldn't be the best time to start, building working groups. And so we must be ready to do this when it opens. Sometimes such things happen.
Absolutely. Thank you. We still have some 10 minutes. I hope there are some questions from the audience. Please identify yourself and be brief if possible. Anyone? I see. Please.
Jens Karklinch, Ambassador at Large, used to be Latvian Ambassador to UN in Geneva. So, Sven, you contradicted yourself, and then you corrected. You said that the Security Council is not reformable, and then you said incremental steps could be done. Incremental steps also are incremental reform steps going in a good direction. But my question was about ambitions. So you said you need to be ambitious. And sometimes, at least now, thinking about our potential membership in Security Council, I feel that not only those who do not think the same way as us, but our like-minded partners do not want us to be too ambitious. So how you would reconcile the small country desire to be ambitious and be visible in Security Council and maybe bigger countries' reluctance to go maybe too far or not as far as they would like or we would like to go?
It's an interesting question in a sense that I haven't observed exactly the kind of thing that you mentioned, but what was a real surprise to me, and even I would say a little bit of disappointment, how strong sense of ownership people and countries have. You know, I did this, and when somebody else comes in and starts, you know, taking the credit or something, there is a disaster. And a good example, you mentioned COVID, you know, the Security Council was not able to adopt a COVID resolution that was basically only needed in order to call for ceasefires in international conflicts during the pandemic. That's the only thing. But typically for United Nations, it became a long resolution, you know, saying this, that. And the more you put in, the more conflict you can get into. And there was even a question of how to call the virus. And so China was blocking it, but it was a French-Tunisian resolution. And Americans were wanted the Chinese or Wuhan virus or something because President Trump was very much, you know, pushing it. And so it was completely blocked, you know, easy thing. There's a pandemic in the world, you know, look at what's happening and we can't even do this small thing. So we decided, I drafted an alternative resolution, and together with Christoph, the German ambassador, we presented an alternative resolution, with just very short one, taking away all the stuff that made the problems. Oh my God, that was... At the moment, there was such a hatred coming from some of the original presenters of the document. So nothing came out of it, but I think it gave a push. And so at the German presidency in early July, finally, Security Council was able to adopt it. But this is a kind of thing, again, ambition, you know. I could have sat there, and it was Estonian presidency when we did this. French ambassador, who was and still is a very good friend, wasn't for a while. but then it worked out. And I think these kinds of things, even though it might be difficult, even though you might get into trouble, but it helps. And so therefore, I think that ambition is necessary, but like I said earlier, cautious ambition. You have to know what you are doing. You have to be able to carry through what you started.
Anyone wants to expand on this question, or we move forward? Please.
Gudrun Maslow, German ambassador. I have a question to our Latvian and Estonian colleagues. I was really impressed about your presentation, saying, you know, they're thinking about doing it every 20 to 30 years. But how do you preserve the knowledge that you have gained during your membership? Is there some kind of a coordination mechanism between, for example, the Baltic countries, or with the countries in your vicinity? How do you do this? What's the suggestion that you would give to other smaller countries to prepare best for these kind of memberships? Thank you.
Finally, Andrejs will have an opportunity to answer questions.
Well, for us, this is still a very new experience. I have to be careful because we haven't been on the council yet. So our vote is in next June, and it is a contested vote. So we're waiting for the outcome of the GA elections. But I think fundamentally, I think we have very narrow, very close alliance of priorities between the Baltic states. And of course, in this today, I can say that certainly it was very important that Lithuania was on the council when Russia tried to annex Crimea, and Lithuania was fighting for the right language. Lithuania couldn't succeed. You know, from the documents, 2014, Lithuania couldn't get aggression on the documents of the General Assembly, not to speak about the Security Council. But it's very important that there was at least one fighter by the table defending the right things. We discussed already cybersecurity. I personally think it's good to have continuity between certain like-minded states. Not that every time somebody invents something radically new, but on WPS was mentioned, certainly cross-regional priority. We see a lot of pushback from other corners, so we have to coordinate. At least among the Baltic states, we have this understanding and the need for Consistency is important. And absolutely, as German colleague mentioned, to get the right countries on the council. Because particularly last year, there was a very dramatic situation. From EEG, we had Slovenia and Belarus. Imagine if another supporter of Russian war in Ukraine gets a vote. So
and you, Andrejs, were instrumental in solving it.
I did a little bit. I voted for Slovenia. but this is very important for us. I don't know.
I touched upon this subject a little bit when I introduced, saying I saw as my task to get the diplomats the best posts they can have, because I believe pretty much every country, we did it at least, there is also a document prepared after that, the lessons learned, that experiences, everything, what happened during the 2 years in the council. But this is more of an archive thing, researchers later on look at it and so on. But mainly the experience that you are talking about stays in the people. And this is something that shouldn't be lost. And very often, because their whole enthusiasm, everything is there for like 6 months after that. Then people, go on and they forget that it happened. But it has to be carried on in the people. And they have to, first of all, they become better diplomats, but they also know some skills. They know some issues where and what happens. A good example is, how it already helped us right away, even though we were not in the council anymore, the night that Russia attacked Ukraine. And there was a late night Security Council meeting. And sometimes some people are saying, what a coincidence. It was not a coincidence, but the Western the intelligence services knew exactly when it's going to happen. So we knew that it's going to happen. And specifically, therefore, even though it was Russian presidency at the time, they called a late-night Security Council meeting, and it happened during the meeting. And I have SMSs to prove with an American friend of mine. I was wrong by 20 minutes. Basically, it was known that it's going to happen. But what was important, I called Andrejs and our Lithuanian colleague because I knew how it works, because all the press is there. And there is where the stakeouts, so the press conferences are given. There's a special room with all the press over there. And I know that the microphone is open because of having been in the council. I know how it works. And so we ran into this meeting, and like 11:30 or something at night, when the meeting was over, we ran to the podium and we gave a Baltic States statement, even though it was prepared as it's going to happen. So I was reading it and I was trying to put into past tense, that did it, not will do, and so on. And the Secretary General was sadly standing there because it was him who should have been there. And my wife was sitting at home and watching it. It was covered by BBC, all the Security Council meeting. And my wife was saying, Sven is there, because that's where the press is there. But why we could do this is that I knew how things work. I knew the technicalities. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I think this rotation between the Baltic states has to continue. There always has to be somebody who knows.
Exactly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess we have exhausted our time. We have maybe last 5 minutes because we started a bit late. This conference has started in 2006 as a conference organized on the sidelines of the NATO summit. And it has evolved considerably, and the last few years UN has been part of and parcel of this conference. So I think it's a clear indication that in Latvia, here in the Baltics, we understand that the world is much more smaller than we had thought, and we certainly need more friends, and we certainly have been to be active outside of the outside of Brussels, outside of Washington. We cannot rely maybe only on big P3 members. We have to chip in and invest in the safer, greener, and more prosperous world. Maybe if everyone could say just 1 minute why we have to strengthen UN, why we have to be there. 1 minute each to wrap up. I don't know, Germany maybe first?
Okay, well, It's the only organization where all the countries are present. And if we want international solidarity for our issues and our conflicts in our region, I think we need to show solidarity for the other regions as well, and the UN is the place for that.
Thank you. Mexico.
Yeah, I think for the same reasons, it's the only representative organization of whole regions and the world, contrary to the Security Council. So everyone is included, everyone can participate. All the situations can be dealt with the GA. So I think it's better to preserve what we have with difficulties, with some shortcomings, but still there's an opportunity to get a better organization for all of us.
It's good that members of G20 and G7, G6, they acknowledge that this is important. Sven?
I think there's a lot to be critical about. But at the same time, if you think about the nature of United Nations, it's kind of nonsense to be critical because it cannot be better than the world. Mm-hmm. It reflects the world. And when you are saying that it's not ideal, yes, there is no ideal world. That's what the world looks like. And without it, it would definitely be even worse. And people also forget that there are some things like UNICEF, what they are doing, you know, peacekeeping. Then you have disaster relief, issues that work actually pretty well. So therefore, yes, it's a very problematic organization, but it would be even worse without it.
Thank
you.
Gunda.
I have 2 points. First of all, the UN is a citadel of multilateralism, and if we compare multilateral relations with, let's say, bilateral, they differ very much. And I think one of the main aspects is that all those fruits of multilateralism, they come a bit later. It's a long-term run. That's the first point. And the second point, yes, as I said earlier, the UN is the place actually where well, the destiny of the rules-based international order is being decided right now. This is the reason why we must be there, why we must be at the UN Security Council table. It's not simply crucial for us as small countries, it's even existential. We can't exist freely and democratically in another kind of world. We can't imagine this. This, I think, is also one of the arguments for.
Well, we have to wrap up, unfortunately, but I want to thank all participants and panelists and everyone in the audience for attending this session. And I certainly am sure that everyone present will use this big microphone for the defense of the UN Charter, for the proper defense of the Charter against the friends of the Charter. And we hope that if elected next June, Latvia will contribute to that important mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrejs.
Thank you. Thank you.